Welcome back folks, my name's Shane. In today's video we're comparing the G9 Mark II Micro Four Thirds camera up against the LUMIX S9, which I don't have on hand, but after shooting with it recently overseas in Hawaii and then using the G9 Mark II, there's some really interesting crossover between both of these cameras and also some areas which I think the S9 excels and then also where the G9 Mark II excels. But what isn't apparent anymore is the size and weight benefits of Micro Four Thirds. This is kind of lost when you compare these two particular cameras. And I think if you're thinking about getting a travel camera, odds are you might be thinking about the G9 Mark II if you want the latest tech in terms of autofocus and e-stabilization, or you might be looking at the LUMIX S9. So I hope this video is helpful. If you can, leave a thumbs up, all that kind of stuff. I'll timestamp everything down below. Let's get into it. First up, let's talk about size and weight. I think this might be the most important factor when choosing a camera for travel, almost over everything else. So at least it is for me anyway. So the G9 Mark II comes in at 658 grams, whereas the S9 comes in at 486. So the S9, the full frame camera, actually gets the weight and size advantage over the G9 Mark II. There's a few obvious considerations between both of these two camera bodies. First up, the G9 Mark II has an electronic viewfinder, so if you like to use an EVF, this would be the camera to buy. The S9 doesn't have one, and this is why it helps keep the overall size and weight down. We also get dual SD card slots on the G9 Mark II as opposed to just one on the S9. But in all of my experience with both cameras so far, I always prefer taking the thing that's smaller and lighter. So for me personally, the S9 gets the win, but the handling goes to the G9 Mark II. This big grip is awesome. And if you buy the S9, you'll need to pair it with the small rig grip to actually get a camera that's comfortable to use handheld. So just keep that in mind. That will add a few grams, but again, it's still far lighter than the G9 Mark II. All right, let's talk battery life in the real world. So if you're a hybrid shooter, the battery life on both of these cameras is excellent. The G9 Mark II has way better battery life in my test than the GH7, just using them as an everyday carry. So if you're looking for a Micro Four Thirds camera with great battery life, the G9 Mark II is definitely the way to go. While the technical super rating for the G9 Mark II is rated at 390, overall you can get a full day of hybrid shooting on a single battery, which is awesome. Now the S9 has a super rating of 470, so we get improved battery life, which is crazy because it's again a full frame sensor versus Micro Four Thirds. You would think the Micro Four Thirds camera would be a little more efficient, but it's not the case. But again, in real world scenarios, whether I'm shooting with the S9 or G9 Mark II, a battery will last me the entire day. Now let's talk about the photography features, trade-offs and benefits between the G9 Mark II and the S9. So the cool thing about the G9 Mark II is it has all of the great photographic features we've had in all the previous cameras, but now with phase hybrid autofocus, and of course we get a mechanical shutter. If you need a mechanical shutter and you have issues with banding without it, then get the G9 Mark II. It's an awesome photographic camera. I've actually enjoyed shooting photos with this far more than I thought I would, so it's really cool. That said though, the S9, without its mechanical shutter and a larger sensor, is still capable of producing beautiful photos. And I would argue in certain situations, it will give you better results. But again, if you can't live without a mechanical shutter and you think it's gonna cause problems for you, then go for the G9 Mark II. That said, I've never had any issues with the LUMIX S9, and for travel photos out on a bright sunny day like this, or even in low light situations, I've not got one photo that has any form of banding anywhere, but that's because I'm probably not shooting in that exact scenario. But if you're a serious photographer, get the G9 Mark II. If you're a hobbyist or enthusiast or someone who just likes to capture beautiful images, the S9 will be the better choice. When it comes to video quality, both of these cameras will give you excellent results, and there's some trade-off and benefits to both systems. So the biggest benefit to the G9 Mark II is that we can switch modes between 4K 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, 100 and 120p, all in 4K without incurring any extra crop. So the fun factor goes to the G9 Mark II, and 4K at 120 frames per second looks absolutely beautiful coming off of this sensor. So if you like to shoot slow-mo, the win here, at least in 4K 120, goes to the G9 Mark II. Where the S9 really has the advantage is if you're shooting in the standard frame rates of 24, 25 or 30 frames per second. You're getting that full frame sensor with better dynamic range, better low light performance, and overall a better end result. So for shooting in most challenging situations, I'm going to give the win to the LUMIX S9, but you do start to get crops at shooting 4K 50 or 60 frames per second. So if you can't live with that, then the G9 Mark II is definitely the way to go. But I got to tell you, shooting 4K 50 or 60 frames per second on the S9, I think looks every bit as good or better than the G9 Mark II with the full sensor readout. It's a pretty special sensor when it comes to its dynamic range and just how it handles a scene. So yeah, I would have no problems recommending the S9 even with that crop. And for me, while it's not ideal, I still think you can get better results out of the S9. So I'm gonna give the win to that just when it comes to video quality. When it comes to the lens lineup, both of the camera systems are excellent. I'm gonna give the win overall to the full frame system when it comes to primes, and I'm gonna give the win to the Micro Four Thirds system when it comes to the zooms. If you're looking for a telephoto zoom, or even a 24-70 equivalent like this 12-35 f2.8, this is where Micro Four Thirds really shines. This lens is about a third of the size of the Sigma 24-70 or the LUMIX 24-70 for full frame. So it's an awesome choice for travel. It's versatile. It's fast enough at f2.8 to let in enough light for most shooting situations. So for lightweight portable zoom lenses, Micro Four Thirds definitely gets the win. If you like to shoot primes, the full frame system is the way to go. The S series of primes are the most consistent series of lenses I've seen for any system. I used to shoot Sony for a while as well. I had a few G Master lenses, and I preferred the S series of primes based on their consistency, low focus breathing, excellent optical quality. There's only one thing that sort of makes them harder to recommend, and that's the price. So if you're comparing, say, the LUMIX 25mm f1.7 up against the S series 50mm f1.8, there's a big difference in price, but the end result win goes to the full frame system when it comes to primes. But for travel purposes, if you're looking for a telephoto zoom or zoom lens in particular, Micro Four Thirds is still hard to beat. In-body image stabilization for both cameras is excellent when shooting video. If you're not using the new E-stabilization, the G9 Mark II might be slightly better, but if you are using it, they're the same. You do get a crop with E-stabilization on, but it almost gives you gimbal-like results when shooting handheld. So whether you're using the G9 Mark II in this particular case or the S9, it's going to look the same. I've compared them. I can't see a huge difference in terms of the end result. That said, both cameras have the IBIS boost mode, which is essentially a mode that looks like the camera's on a tripod when shooting in a static position like this, and both of them do an excellent job, and that can also tie into the E-stabilization. Now, if you're going to be using the E-stabilization on high, there's less crops on the G9 Mark II than there is on the S9, which basically crops into APS-C, which again is a bigger field of view than the Micro Four Thirds with the additional E-stabilization crop. But with all things being equal, there's less crops on this than there is on the full frame camera, but the end result in standard mode, which I think most people will be using, is essentially the same, and I can't see a huge difference. One advantage to Micro Four Thirds here is we get more lenses with optical image stabilization. Not all of them have an on-off function like this, but there's just plenty of lenses that do offer additional stabilization within the lens. So if that's important to you, Micro Four Thirds is still great. At the end of the day, I'm calling this a tie. Both systems offer excellent stabilization, and again, to the eye test, I can't see a huge difference. When it comes to autofocus performance for video, both camera systems are now using phase hybrid autofocus, and it's great. If you're coming from DFD autofocus of any description, going over to phase hybrid autofocus is excellent. You can walk in and out of frame. It's going to track you reliably and repeatably, but there's a few situations where Micro Four Thirds lenses don't work as well on the G9 Mark II as all of the lenses for the S9, and I'll explain why. So if you've got something like this 12-35 or the 10-25 or 25-50 or any of the new or more modern Micro Four Thirds lenses, at least in my tests, I've noticed that the autofocus performance is every bit as good. It will track you as you move back and forth, all that kind of stuff, but there's times where the older lenses, even the 25mm f1.7, just don't track you anywhere near as well. So if you're going to be walking towards the camera, it's slightly behind you. Now you can of course tweak the settings within the camera system and change the speed and sensitivity and all that kind of stuff, but on the LUMIX S9 with the modern lenses, I don't even have to touch the custom settings. I turn on human tracking and I'm good to go. Now this is the same experience with this lens or the 10-25, for example, on the GH7 right now. It's going to give me excellent autofocus and be very sticky and keep up with me and all that kind of stuff. But there's times where the older lenses, some of those old legacy lenses, feel like they need to be refreshed to sort of keep up with the modern autofocus system. So I'm going to give the win here to the S9. But if you have some of the more modern lenses for micro four thirds, it's going to work great, and I trust it. I've shot plenty of videos out in the park here, and it's never let me down in terms of tracking a bird or Rhiannon as she's walking around, or me as I'm doing this. So it works great. But just know if you have some of the more modern primes or zooms for micro four thirds, the autofocus will be fine, but I still have to give the win to the full frame system. All right, let's wrap this up. I'm going to talk about which camera body I've enjoyed shooting with more as an everyday carry, the G9 Mark II or the LUMIX S9. Now, both camera systems offer a lot of benefits over the other, but my favorite has to be the LUMIX S9. That's right, the full frame camera body. Now, I've been shooting micro four thirds since the G85 and the GH5 days, and the S9 feels like the best camera for travel purposes only. Is it the best camera on a technical level? Maybe not. This has 4K at 120 frames per second and no additional crops and mechanical shutter and all the stuff we've already spoken about, but the S9 is smaller, lighter, it's more fun to use for me personally, and I love the fact it has hybrid zoom, which is a feature where you turn the zoom ring and it punches in even further than the focal length of the lens, and it's all done digitally. So for travel photos and video, I actually prefer having hybrid zoom. It turns that 20 to 60mm kit lens into something way more usable, and that's my one and done travel combo. The days of micro four thirds being smaller and lighter doesn't come down to the camera body anymore. It comes down to the lens lineup, which is where micro four thirds really shines, but it's also, it's kind of Achilles heel. I took the 10 to 25mm zoom lens with me on this particular trip, and I'm shooting this video with me, and I'm never taking it again due to its size and weight. If I'm going to take a lens like this with a camera body as big as the GH7, I might as well bring a full frame rig, which is smaller and lighter. So how I see micro four thirds working for me personally now is with lenses like this 12 to 35mm f2.8, the 9mm f1.7 prime, and something like the little 25mm f1.7. That's where this really shines. I think micro four thirds shines when you get a versatile zoom range with minimum size. So that's where I see micro four thirds kind of fitting in. I'm done with micro four thirds trying to look similar to full frame. I'm going to treat it as a completely different camera system, and I'm going to focus more on micro four thirds being small and light. So this is maybe a learning experience for me, taking this big 10 to 25mm lens with me. I love this lens, by the way. I think it's fantastic, and for studio use or any paid stuff, this lens is fantastic, but I'm done trying to make micro four thirds compete with full frame. And for me personally now, this is all about convenience, but the win for just sheer fun and pleasure goes to the S9. I just love the end result, and some of the shots you've no doubt been seeing on screen I think look pretty great, and like nearly all of it was shot with the kit lens. So yeah, you can get great results out of that camera. And again, everyone's got different opinions on everything. This is just my hands-on experience shooting with both of them over the last year with this, and over the last 7 or 8 months or so with the S9. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let us know what you think. Let me know which camera system you prefer and why. And again, this is just for one particular scenario with one douchebag here online. So take it for what it's worth. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Catch you soon. See ya.